Good evening on this frigid Wednesday. It's even pretty frigid here in Florida. I hope all of you are staying warm tonight, and I want to thank those of you that are here who are joining me and who will join in a few as we get started here. Just want to say hi. It's been a while. Hope everything's going well. Hope your new year is going well. And you know, you're off to a great start. So since I want to respect your time, and quite frankly, I turn into a pumpkin about 10 o'clock, let's just get rolling here and get into the deal. How many of you have had an experience or an event happen or heard a song or something that triggered a memory that all of a sudden kind of puts you in a funk? You know, you're not even really sure why. It just all of a sudden it killed the mood, you know, made you sad, made you angry, you know, kind of threw you off your game. Well, I'm Christian. I should introduce myself. I'm the founder of Second Life Coaching, and what if I told you that there was a way that you could rewire your brain to minimize the impact of these negative responses to these experiences? And it's true. And recently I've gotten a lot of questions from others about how do I go about the healing process. I run a group for parents who have fractured relationships with their children, and kind of moved recently beyond the comfort level to the, okay, now how do I get better level? And so I wanted to share with you tonight, just take a few minutes, a tool that my first coach gave to me about a dozen years ago. One that I still use today, and that one that if you use and practice will help you kind of respond to things instead of just reacting. Now, as humans, we tend to run on autopilot, right? We're always kind of, brains are somewhere else. We're thinking of this, we're thinking of that. You know, what we got to pick up at the store, what projects we got finished, we got to pick up kids. And so we're always kind of distracted. So our brains are running kind of, you know, automatically. They're taking all this information in, and they really have been since, you know, we were wee little tots. And because we tend to run on automatic, we don't give much thought to the stimuli, to the things going into our brain. And so the brain is kind of left up to its own devices to figure out how we're going to react to things, right? It's kind of like all these things come in, right? And your brain is this giant hard drive. And so all these experiences come in, and they immediately go into certain folders, very top level folders, you know, work, personal, relationship, family, kids, what have you. So they all kind of go first level right into there, right into the top level folders. And from there, they kind of get filtered out through your brain's kind of internal, I guess, Google search algorithm. And it looks for something similar in your past that matches or closely matches the new information and the new experience coming in. And once it matches, that's when it triggers everything. It triggers your emotional reaction, it triggers your physical reaction, and it triggers what actions you take. And before you know it, you've reacted to something and really not even know it. Now, every human experience goes through six different steps. There's the event, right? There's the label, which is the top level folder everything goes in. There's the meaning, and we'll get to define these in a few minutes. Yes, I know that. I did that on purpose. The emotion, your response to it, the action or reaction, and then the result. And this is kind of how every experience that you have is filtered through your brain. My first coach always used to like to say that you can't change the event or the result, you can only change the meaning and the emotion that you give to it. Now, let me explain. Emotions are very, very powerful things. They're what's responsible for, and I notice I keep leaning on the table here and shaking everything. They're the things that generate the neural pathways in our brains. And unfortunately, negative emotions and negative responses are a lot more powerful. They generate, what I like to think of as 6-lane highways through our brain that make any sort of negative response kind of like the automatic response for anything. And it's, that's why we kind of have to practice gratitude. We have to think about the things we're grateful for. We have to intentionally practice positive thinking, because overall, it's not our deal, and it's a little less ingrained in our neural pathways. So we have to intentionally use this practice, and we'll talk about how to do it in a second, to kind of rewire and reroute and kind of create detours in our brains. Now let's go through kind of real quickly what each of these things are. First is the event, right? This is the thing that happens. It's the fight that you have. It's the test that you fail. It's the song that you hear on the radio. It's anything, any action that happens that automatically starts to trigger a response in your brain, right? Then there's the label, which is, like I said, it's the top level folder. All these events go into certain folders or boxes so that your brain knows where to store them. Now here comes the meaning. The meaning is where it starts getting a little tricky, and this is the thing that we really have to think about. The meaning, particularly when we have a negative or less than positive experience, it can be boiled down to a few things. I'm not, good enough, smart enough, handsome enough, talented enough. I'm a failure. I should have known better than to try something new, to speak up to whatever. And so this is the meaning that we give to these negative experiences. Say you go and decide you're going to take a brand new class, right? You're going to go to try something new. You're going to enroll in a community college and you're going to take a brand new class in something that you've never studied before. And you're going to give it a shot. And I'll even use a little bit of my own experience here in a second. And you get to the exam, you're excited, you're learning, it's difficult, but it's fun and it's engaging. And you get to that first exam and you bomb it. Immediately you think, I've studied hard, I've worked hard, and I failed. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. So there you go, you immediately labeled that experience as I'm not smart enough. Then the emotion kicks in. You get sad. You start feeling, kind of ashamed of how bad you did. You start kind of beating yourself up about everything. So what's your reaction? Most people go, well, screw it. I quit. I'm done. I can't handle this. And they just bail. The result? You don't try anything new. And so you miss out on something that could have been a great experience, something new and exciting, something you really, really wanted to do, and something you could have been really, really talented at and brought a lot to the world. I had this experience first few weeks of nuke school when I was in the Navy. I was growing up, I was always one of the smart kids. Struggled a little bit through A school. I had a chief that kind of kicked my ass and got me into shape, but going into nuke school, I knew it was going to be tougher. So I'm sitting in class, right? First couple of days, and I hear everybody talking around me, and they're talking what sounds like a second language, one that I don't even recognize. And I realize all these people are probably way, way smarter than I am. So I immediately start thinking, I'm not smart enough. I probably shouldn't be here. But since I didn't really have the choice to bail out, I thought, all right, well, let's buckle down and see what we can do. Got to the first exam and absolutely failed it. I mean, horribly. I don't even think it was anywhere close to 50%. So that reinforces the I'm not smart enough and I'm a failure thing. And I immediately thought, my immediate reaction was, I'm so screwed. Here I am signed up for 6 years, and on the very first shot, I fell flat on my face. I was, I was depressed. I felt stupid. I was embarrassed. And the only thing that I couldn't do was bail out. And so what was the result? I ended up on mandatory study hours, which was you went to class and then you had to go to mandatory study hours afterwards. So that's kind of how it works. And those things get reinforced every time you have a negative experience. They kind of build on everything, all that information you've taken in from the time you were real little. And it's not necessarily things that you do, it's things you hear, it's in commercials you see on TV, it's things you overhear, it's things parents and friends and whatever say to you. And so all these little negative bits, all these little negative aggressions kind of build up in your brain, and we develop this really negative kind of self-image of ourselves, and it's really, really difficult to overcome. And it's it becomes instinctual to retreat whenever we run into a tough situation, or if we don't perform up to our expectations, or we have a bad day at work, or a presentation goes bad, we have a bad breakup, have an argument with the kids, what have you. So about 12 years ago, I went to my very first personal development seminar, and I've got a gift, I got a present for all of you that are here that are watching this. If you're watching this at the end or down in the comment box, click gimme, 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 or follow, or leave me a comment. I've got this cute little one-page cheat sheet about everything that we're talking about, so you can look it over and put it somewhere so you can remind yourself about everything that we're talking about and how this practice goes. So we were sitting in the seminar, and he brought up this thing called the model of human experience. And we already talked about it a little bit: the event, the label, the meaning, the emotion, the action, reaction, and the result. And when he said you can't change the action of the result, or the event of the result, but you can change the meaning and the emotion to it. And it was really an interesting thought. And it goes to the learning to respond and not react. And I believe, if I recall, he was talking to somebody who had a really tough childhood, and they carried that with them well into adulthood. And it really impacted their ability to develop healthy relationships, and they felt that they weren't good enough, they weren't deserving of love, and it was reinforced growing up by the kind of crappy relationship that they had with their parents, and I think it was with the father in particular. So he stopped this person and said, look, think of it this way: your parents did the best that they could with the tools that they had. And of course there was some objection. He goes, no, they didn't have they didn't have the ability, or they hadn't had the experience of going through something like personal development or learning communication skills. It was they did the best with what they had. And that's kind of how all of our families did it. We always do the best we can with the tools that we have. And he goes, now think of it this way as also, what did it teach you that you didn't want? What was the experience and the example of what you didn't want to be as a parent that it left you? And it kind of changed the whole thinking around the whole thing. So instead of blaming their childhood for the life that they had and their difficulties in relationships, they came to a point where they were able to accept what had happened, almost come to a sense of forgiveness, saying, okay, well, they did the best they could with what they had, understanding that You know, instead of putting their experience and their knowledge back on them, they took themselves out of the equation and said, that's just what they had. And they did the best they could. Now, there's always going to be examples to the extremes of, and those aren't the ones we're talking about. We're talking kind of the normal, everyday, you know, experiences here. So what I want you to think about, and particularly for those of you in my parents group who are watching this or who will watch this later, when you have these experiences, or have these songs or things that trigger negative memories, I want you to understand that, you know, you did the best you could with what you had, and they are putting their expectations on you, which is unfair, right? And so when you think about it, what did it teach you? You know, what did it show you going forward from that point? Did you learn maybe how to communicate a little bit differently? Did you see where maybe you could have, you know, you had, you know, a part to play in it and have come to terms with it and have released that, the guilt and shame, understanding that at the time you didn't know any better? You know, you didn't have the tools to do better. You know, I know in a lot of experiences and a lot of instances in my life, that's where I've come to. And I use this tool a lot, really a ton, because it's a consistent practice. I notice that if I'm distracted or if I'm under a lot of stress, I tend to click to the automatic response, and because I've been using this for about a dozen years, I'm able to recognize that and take that 1 second to breathe and think about the response instead of just reacting. And that's really kind of what this is all about. It's allowing you to take that moment and decide what the experience means, to decide what emotion you're going to give to it, what label you're going to give to it, instead of just allowing your past experience and the file system in your head and the, you know, and your brain's internal Google search algorithm tell you how you're going to respond. You know, there's a great saying that says life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And I honestly believe that when we learn to respond instead of react, we take that brief, you know, couple of seconds between stimuli and response, it makes things go a lot smoother. It allows us a little bit more control over ourselves, and in the end can, you know, keep things from escalating or sending us down, you know, a downward spiral. You know, there are still things which will knock me out for a few days and sometimes, you know, a couple of weeks or so, but I know that I can use this and to rethink and rewire and bulldoze that negative superhighway in my brain and start to implant new, you know, positive neural pathways so that it changes the algorithm. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about tonight. I hope you all stay warm. Like I said, if you'd like a copy of this handy dandy little thing, just leave a comment in the box, and I hope you all stay warm, and we'll talk again soon. All right?